Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. It's a great pleasure to have you on our panel discussion. So we'll be discussing bridging the gender gap in the digital space today. So my name is Candy Trisha Kosiwe. I'm from Botswana. I'm a long-term editor with Wikipedia, and I'm also part of the Wikimedia Botswana Community User Group. So today I wanted us to unpack the discussion surrounding bridging gender gap in the digital space to understand what are the issues within this underrepresentation when it comes to the gender gap. And I also wanted us to also discuss what are the ways we can mitigate these issues that are causing this gender bias when it comes to women being represented more online. So today we have speakers from different countries in Africa. So I would like you guys to introduce yourselves, the panelists. I'll first start off with Betty. Please kindly introduce yourself.
Okay, so I am Betty Kankam-Boadu. I am a journalist. Recently, I've been dabbling in a bit of communications as well, but I'm a freelance journalist and communications professional based in Ghana. So my background is radio. I've also done quite an extensive work in the digital news field. I ran a digital newsroom for almost 4 years, and currently, as I said, I'm freelance, so I do work for clients, and that's how Candy and I met. I currently host Wiki Loves Women's Inspiring Open podcast, so I guess that's my connection with Wiki and with Candy. But yeah, briefly, that's who I am, and that's what I'm into. Oh, and I'm based in Ghana, if I haven't said that already.
Oh, thank you so much, Betty. It's a really great pleasure to have you here today. I'll move on right onto Tshepo Jamillah Moyo. Sorry for mispronouncing your name if I have. Please kindly introduce yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I had muted myself and forgotten. It's actually Jamillah. But you were close. Pretty close. Hi, everyone. My name is Tshepo Jamillah Moyo. Everybody calls me Tshepo or TJ. I don't mind either. I am based in Gaborone, and I don't like to define myself, but usually when I have to in situations like this, I do like to mention that I'm a writer, an intersectional feminist, and a development practitioner. I'm also a human rights defender with a particular interest in women and girls' rights, as well as other minorities, particularly queer minorities. Those are some of the communities that I have worked with. People also call me an activist. But my work is generally in creating, if I would summarize it, creating a better world for women and girls and other minorities, a world where we all feel comfortable. I've worked in Gaborone throughout all the levels. CSO, I think the only people I haven't worked for are the government. But at one point or another, I've worked with different CSOs at the national level as well as regional. And I'm excited to be here because the internet is actually where I discovered my passion for activism and human rights. And so talking about it as a tool, not just in my work, but for everyone, is an exciting thing. Did I answer the question? Sometimes
Yes,
that happens.
yes.
Okay. All right.
You introduced yourself.
Thank you.
Quite Yeah, thank you so much, Tshepo. I'll move on to Sunshine, Fionah Komusana. Can you please kindly introduce yourself? Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is what Candy just said. Sunshine Fionah Komusana. I am an African feminist based in Kampala, Uganda. A lawyer by training, and sometimes I don't know if I should say that because I rarely use my law qualification. I work with Whose Knowledge. I just joined 2 months ago as the Visible Wiki Women campaign coordinator. Prior to that, I was doing reproductive justice work with Akina Mama Africa, which is a Pan-African feminist leadership organization. My background is very much in activism, not activism in the sense because I come from a dictatorship, going on the street sometimes lead to death. But I do a lot of activism online. I used to write. I don't know if I write anymore, unless I'm writing reports. And I contribute and volunteer edit for African Feminism, which is a platform that curates voices of African feminists from across the world, which is work that I do with another African feminist called Rosebel Kabumire. So yeah, that's about me in a nutshell. I think I told Candy that I trust my knowledge of tech feminism as far as I can throw it, but I am sure that in any conversation about bridging gaps, I can be able to articulate those. So thank you so much for yeah.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to have you guys here, and thank you everyone for coming through. Unoka, Oteng, Helen, Vivienne, and Lungo. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting and coming in to learn and also share your ideas here. So I would like to start off asking the first question to Betty. What are you doing as an individual to ensure that women's voices are heard in the digital space? So it would be nice to know what you're currently doing to make sure like women's voices are heard.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, I'll start with a bit of background and then probably, come into what I do now. But in all the spaces that I found myself, I always say that, I guess it was easy to find this path because all the spaces I found myself, I realized that something needed to be done. So the first time I stepped into a newsroom, in fact, my editor, the one who hired me, told me that, I'm really going out of my way to hire you because I don't normally like hiring women because there are lots of excuses. Yep, he told me that. There are lots of excuses when it comes to this kind of job because this is a very fast-paced newsroom, and sometimes like news break during, at midnight, just at dawn, odd hours in the day. And sometimes when you call on women to go and do what needs to be done, you get a lot of excuses like, oh, I'm taking care of my children. Oh, I can't do that. I can't leave my husband. Oh, so he was very forthright with me that I don't hire women, but I'm making an exception for you. And I was pleased to get into the newsroom. So, but later on, I really thought about what he said, and I was like, this is so weird, because if you are not hiring a lot of women, and indeed there weren't a lot of women in the newsroom at that time. It has improved now, but way back in 2011, it wasn't. So I knew my job was cut out for me because then I knew that if you're not hiring a lot of women, it means that a lot of women's stories aren't being told. So it was easy for me to find my path. So, a lot of my stories focused on telling the stories of women, mostly marginalized women. So, I'll go to prisons and talk to pregnant women, for instance, I'll go to the streets and talk to women who are blind who beg. I'll talk to children. I'll talk to nursing mothers and how they were coping. And even though it was radio then, for me, it was still, trying to give voice to women in the small way that I could do. So, I mean, I also came to realize that that's so important and that's really needed. So I pretty much continued that part. Went into a digital newsroom after that. Also brought on a lot of women so that we can cover a lot more women's stories. That was done. I remember around that time, every Women's Month, we had something we called Paul's Women's Month, where we would interview a lot of business women, young women. The focus was on young because I was running a very, digital. And sometimes when we talk about digital, you really want to attract young people. So we interviewed a lot of young business women, gave them voice to tell the world what they were doing, what they were into, and all that. And then from that, I moved on to a foundation, the Media Foundation for West Africa, really that, it's funny, please, really that's also, but I mean, when I went there they did well in terms of women representation on, when it comes to the staff, but things were pretty terrible when it comes to the actual work these women who have been put in the positions could do. Later on, they shifted focus. They focused a lot more of also trying to bridge the gender gap, pretty much like what you were doing, but that was really Ghana focused. And then I got an opportunity to do a research into why the media was not speaking to women experts. And it was an observation, I had come to, and also my partner, Nanama Jumanasanti, had come to, because we've worked in newsrooms. And when we talk about who an expert is, the default is to call a man to speak on whatever issue that is being discussed. So we were part of the problem. We were complicit. It's not like, we're part of the problem. So we were like, okay, how do we solve this, or how do we address this? Luckily, we got funding from City University in the UK, and then we embarked on a research, basically to tell the media that you are not speaking to women. And indeed, that was what the results showed. It was a 1-to-10 ratio. That's how bad it was. So if they speak to 10 men, they will speak to a woman expert. So we turned it into a mini campaign to kind of more like rank the media houses that we sampled that were doing, well in terms of speaking to more women than the others, so that hopefully the others will feel a little embarrassed to do better. So that was also our way of pushing women's voices. And then I also got this a gig, I call it gig, with Wiki Loves Women, also in line with trying to put prominent women's voices out there. So I host these podcasts of women across Africa. We try to tell their stories, basically trace their journey, so others will be inspired and others will know that it can be done if you want to. But the main aim really, beyond inspiring people, is also to push women's voices out there strongly, so that people know that, yes, there are women who are doing great things on the continent and beyond, and these women need to be heard, and these women's stories need to be told. And that is what we're currently doing with Inspiring Open. So yeah, pretty much that's my general. And obviously, all these things we do, we use digital tools. You cannot afford to use that in this day and age. So yeah, I would say that's my journey in trying to, put women's voices out there and trying to bridge the gap, if I should say, in the sense of my career. Yep.
Oh, that is quite inspiring, and it's really like I'm even like inspired to even do more in the work that I do on trying to have more women also come in and do more within the tech space or the digital space, because currently we have if not around 90 to 80% of men as editors in Wikipedia. So it shows that there is quite much that has to be done. With that being said, I feel like the amount of work you're putting in, going to prison and speaking to even pregnant women who think like they're really an amazing job you're doing, Betty, and I'm really inspired to go into that kind of depth to also try and do such a great work. I really also want to hear your insight, Tshepo. What are you currently doing as an individual to ensure that women's voices are heard? Yeah, it will be great to hear your insight also on this.
Hi. So I think for me, I really liked what Betty said about, when you walk into a space and you realize that if the room is filled with men, then no one will feel the need to tell the stories of women. And I think one thing about me is Betty, do you mind muting your mic? Okay, great. Sorry. That's much better. One thing about me is that I'm a writer, right? And so, like Betty, I am freelancing for a couple of spaces online, and as well as a few newspapers based in Botswana. And I am very intentional about telling the stories of women, particularly women in minorities, because we all know that there are hierarchies in our society, right? Our society decides which women are important. So I like to tell the stories of women who we would consider poor, young women who are marginalized, so sex workers as well, as some of the stories that I've done. But I also like to talk about things that are considered women's issues, or considered taboo, and things that women shouldn't talk about. So I do write a lot about pleasure. I write a lot about women defining themselves. But another thing that was really important to me is I started an online space. It's called Khosigadi Network. And currently it's alive on Instagram. We haven't gotten to the website side of stuff because I need tech help on that side of things, because I'm just a storyteller. And the idea behind it is to document the stories of women in business. So that's one of the things that I'm doing as an individual. It's a space where we're kind of asking women in business, like, how are you coping with this? How are you managing this? And how can we support each other? It's a space for building community and networks, because I think that's one of the things that we struggle a lot with as women. Men go to the bar and they come back and they have business deals. Women, we go to we have fun and we're relaxed and there's no business deal at the end of it. And so for me, I've been very intentional about creating spaces for women to kind of network with each other and begin to build their own communities. I think that's all. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, Tshepo. Thank you so much. I really love the fact that you are working with this, I would say, kind of like inclusion, despite whatever level or whatever status women may have, poor or rich. You're giving them a platform, and a platform where they can share their voices, and you write stories about them. It's really impeccable what you're doing. So I would also love to ask the next question to Fionah. What does technology represent to you, and why did you choose your current field? Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've just really been enjoying listening to everyone contribute to this conversation. And just really share some of the work they are doing. Maybe they should all share like a link to their work. And then so that we're also able to just for ourselves in awe. To your question, what does technology mean for me? Technology represents for me an expansion of the spaces we already occupy. So I think when I think technology, I think just an extension of who we are and how we work and our ways of being. So because with technology, we are just able to do what we physically or like in the physical space are able to do, from organizing. And when I talk about organizing, I'm talking about all the wonderful campaigns that African feminists and feminists everywhere have organized just by using technology. When we talk about campaigns to end violence against women in South Africa with Total Shutdown SA, Total Shutdown Kenya, we had a women's march in Uganda. When we talk about organizing, we talk about the End SARS movement that was organized by the Feminist Coalition and other young people online to protest police brutality. When we look at the Women's March, I think in Zambia, that's the most recent one that I remember, which happened in the pandemic. Technology is a space to extend our work, organizing, but also shopping and, media when we talk about podcasts and things like that. So I think that it's an extension of who we are, our ways of being, but also in a deeply unequal world, like because the world is unequal, technology is also a space where divisions and inequalities are also further entrenched. So when we talk about, for example, shamelessly plugging the work that we do at Who's Knowledge, which is about centering knowledge of marginalized people online and ensuring that women are not erased, that we combat invisibility of women. It's because the technology space has also, the digital space has also continued to entrench inequalities by ensuring that there are less images of women online, for example, Black and brown women, non-binary people, Indigenous women. When we talk about inequalities, we say that technology also excludes women because of the economics of it, because access to internet, you have to be a person of a certain class to be able to access the internet in terms of literacy, in terms of finances. So that's what technology represents. And as a feminist, for me, I don't think I chose this work. I think that I think that because of how feminism and the politics and the ethos of feminist work are, my current field of work is just another way I am contributing to the revolution. So for some time I was doing work on reproductive justice, and now I'm just bringing the same principles of feminism, equality, intersectionality, accountability to the digital space and to knowledge justice. So yeah, that's my response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunshine. I really feel also like diversity and inclusion is really important within the times we're in, especially that if we don't have everyone sitting on the table, it's more like missing out on ideas or somebody who would kind of like give in that different ideas on what they just don't follow the comfortable norm. So with times changing, it's really important to have everyone on the table, have different ideas, and even see how we can accelerate or grow from where we are, without having that kind of like stagnant mind of having the same faces all the time. So I feel, diversity and inclusion is more of like not missing out on opportunities like that. I'll move on to you, Betty. Would you say enough is being done currently to incorporate women in the digital space? And if you say so, why or why not?
I guess I would say that, you know, I think enough is being done, but we also have to recognize that there are challenges, because the digital space, it's open, it's really open, but in as much as it is open, accessibility for some women in certain parts of the world, I think we can probably limit it to Africa. In certain parts of Africa, it's still a challenge. I think I read a research where they said that about 29% of women have access to the internet, and 70% of men do. So this was an Africa research. So this is, talking about the African context. So yes, the internet is very open. If you have a phone that is smart enough and connected to the internet, you can access it. But like I said, there are challenges. There are certain parts of the country, in Ghana, where people still don't have access to the internet, where people who do have access to the internet and are using these digital spaces to, either do business or either talk about issues that are important to them, or just, I guess, hang out there. There are challenges with that as well, because we know that the web can be very hostile to women, and there's evidence to show that. And and then there are times in my life that I have had to I have access to internet, thankfully, because of where I am, in Accra, and I can also afford it. There are people who have access and can't still even afford it, because internet connectivity in Africa is so expensive. Like, it's so expensive, it makes no sense. I don't know what can be done about it. So you may have the access, but affordability is also an issue. So when you have the access and you can afford it, there's also this challenge of, the hostility out there. And for me, I think it really, and I guess maybe the feminists on here could probably speak better to it. But sometimes I feel that it's just deeply rooted in this culture of women not, like, being allowed to talk, or even if you're allowed to talk, like, there's a certain limitation to the kind of voice you can have, so that you are expected. So, as a woman, there's a certain way you're expected to talk, in society. So I guess there's this expectation that when you get online, you're supposed to be, respectful. You have to be respectful though, but modest. Just don't say the stuff that will ruffle feathers, or don't say the stuff that I guess will offend people. And I know so many journalists here in Ghana who have had to deal with hate to the point where it really affected their health, just because they dared to have an opinion and they dared to put it on the internet. So I would say, enough is being done, but there are challenges, that still hinder the progress that we can make. And some of them are really beyond they're beyond our control. Some of them you really can't do anything about. But for the little voice that is on the internet, I guess I would encourage that, regardless of the hate, regardless of the vitriol, you should still speak. And I know when you say this to people who have to go through this hate, it sounds like you don't know what it's like there, but you have to keep doing it so that it gets easier for the next person who can afford a smartphone, or afford to buy internet and get on there. So, Candy, to answer your question, enough is being done, I would say, but there are clear challenges that still need to be addressed.
I totally agree. We definitely have challenges. And also, yes, there's some work that's actually being put to try and instill and make sure women are also being a part of the tech space, despite the challenges of the social narratives or the political narratives or whatever that's out there, that women can't be breaking into those barriers and taking spaces into the tech space like that. What's your what's your idea about this, Tshepo? What do you think about it?
I'm so glad you said I should speak, because I have so much to say about this. So I agree with Betty that there's a number of issues, right? I'm one of those people that talks with my hands. So firstly, there's accessibility, and accessibility can be broken down to, one is the infrastructure for the technology there, right? So we'll talk about areas that have network and areas that don't have network, right? And then it also comes to affordability, which I think is a huge problem in Africa. I know Botswana is not the worst on the scale on the costs of data. I know we're not the worst on the scale as well with infrastructure, because I think BTC has pretty good coverage across the country. The quality of network might be one thing, but there are very few places in this country where there's absolutely no, network at all. So we may be a little bit privileged, but I do know that the costs of data, particularly the costs of Wi-Fi in homes, is just crazy, right? But then we also have the cost of devices, right? And then there's also, how do people use the internet, right? So the reports that tell us about how there's 70% of men and 29% of women, and how many people in Africa are on the internet. What are they doing on the internet, right? I'll give an example. Botswana is a place where almost everybody is on Facebook and Twitter and the Instagrams and all of that. But right now we're seeing a situation where somehow everybody in Botswana is losing their Instagram account to scammers. So there's also the issue of digital safety education. How are we teaching children to use computers? How are we teaching them to be safe on the internet? And I think these are all really I think not enough is being done, right? I think maybe that's where I should start. I think I was shocked. So my partner is a programmer. And he was telling me that he had his first PC that was his when he got to university. And that before that, he would type assignments at his mom's office because they didn't have a PC at home. And it was for me, because I won't lie to anybody, I've grown up pretty middle income and privileged. I went to a school where in computer class, I had my own computer that was designated to me, that I could go and do assignments on during break and etc. And obviously that gives me a lot of comfort with the internet. I know, okay, I make payments on websites that have that padlock. Just to show you my limited tech ability. I know about the padlock. How many people in Botswana know that you need the padlock on the page to know it's a secure site that you can actually pay for stuff? How many people are putting, pictures of their omang and their private information that should, their social, omang is basically Botswana's social security number. People are putting pictures of those on the internet, identification documentations that anybody could use and edit and Photoshop to make themselves new ones, or do credit fraud. There's so many aspects to the internet that I think are beyond just accessibility, and that I feel our governments are not doing enough about. So we have students who have never seen a PC, or have never worked on one, because even in their schools they don't have one. Is computer studies even a compulsory subject in our education system? I don't think it is. I think it's an optional, and it should be. Like, at this point at this stage in technology, we can't say computers or learning about the internet or how to use your PC is something that is optional. It should be compulsory for all students to be learning about the internet, about safety on the internet, about things that they can do. So that's one of the first things that I'm really concerned about, particularly because I'm seeing Forex guys are winning. I'm just going to say. And I think they're mostly, and somebody said the other day, why do Forex people recruit? And I said, the real Forex people don't recruit. The scammers are the ones that recruit, and they're winning because people have no idea how dangerous the internet can be. But they have no idea about the power that the internet holds. And then I also wanted to say that for me, I think in my space, the internet has always been a powerful tool for me. Like when Betty was talking about, being a woman who speaks on the internet and the answers that you get. I remember being 15, 16 years old and discovering Twitter, and it was this amazing place where I was learning so much and having so many conversations. And I think that's why it's important to me to talk about pleasure on the internet, to talk about the things that people find to be taboo in our societies. And unfortunately, one thing I have realized is that it's not a safe space. I'm going to be honest. I have been threatened. I've been threatened with everything from rape to being physically assaulted to, like, I have experienced all the cyberbullying. There was a guy that was sending me emails. I've been threatened with defamation cases. And because I'm an activist, those things are things that I can manage. But like for a young person, for example, who's speaking out and using the internet as a tool to talk about rape that they experienced, to be threatened with the defamation case is like a big thing. They don't even know where to start. So I think we're not doing enough in making sure that people can use the internet safely, making sure that people have access to the internet, that it's affordable. We're also not doing enough in protecting people on the internet. So our cyber laws tend to be very manipulative. They can be used as silencing tools more than they can be used to protect the people that actually need protection. People will post videos of you. My new latest fear now is leaving a curtain open and walking around the house, because next thing you're on a TikTok video, you don't even know how you got there, and you were in your house in your private space, but somebody took this video of you because they wanted to take the video and they've posted it, and you're now reacting to this. So there are those kind of like things that I feel like we're kind of, Africa is still far from kind of dealing with and finding solutions to. I will say though that as much as I feel like we're not doing enough, I don't think it's hopeless. Like, I don't feel there are a lot of things in life that I feel hopeless about, like climate change. I'm very, very hopeless about it. I'm just like, nobody's doing anything. But for me, I feel like the internet is one of those spaces people are talking about and thinking about, and action is happening as much as it is slow.
Oh, thank you so much, Tshepo. I think that was a mouthful. I'll move on to Sunshine. So, Sunshine, do you think with us moving into the digital space, do you think enough sensitization is being done in Africa to cover the basis of technology? I think a bit was from Tshepo. She shared a bit more insight. I would love to hear if you think there's more done when it comes to sensitizing people about the digital space.
All right. Thank you so much. I had things to say about the previous question, but I feel like Tshepo had really answered it well. So in terms of sensitization, I'm going to start from one of the issues that we work on at whose knowledge is on like digital infrastructure, right? And how that affects access, and if digital infrastructure itself is free from bias, because thinking about like who creates these infrastructures, who creates these algorithms, who creates these databases, who creates this data online, and the truth of the matter is it's very skewed against marginalized people, marginalized communities, and of which women are overrepresented in that space. So I think as much as there have been strides to build infrastructure, ICT infrastructure on the continent, connecting people through the internet, we see a lot of business online. That is just like really a small portion, a small percentage of who is actually sensitized and who has actually the kind of basic information around technology. I'll use an example of our parents, right? Our parents and our aunties, the ones we call, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, I call them WhatsApp aunties, the ones that are always, forwarding these messages. They can't change the settings on their phone from light to dark mode, like simple things like that. But also because a lot of our economies are still largely informal, we realized, and the pandemic really ripped off the whatever kind of sheath or whatever that was covering that thin layer of comfortability around people's access and sensitization, to show that very many people can't work online. There are very few women, there are very few people whose jobs could actually migrate to 100% remoteness. Or and great examples from Uganda are women in the marketplace were were asked by the president that if they actually want to stay and sell their goods and be able to work, they would have to sleep in the market. So there's just so much lack of sensitization, but also the lack of sensitization has to come after, accessibility, and accessibility is still a big issue. Accessibility, affordability, availability, and also when you think about the intersections of people, sensitization around things like disability. So many of work and things that can be done online are not are what's the word? Ableist, yeah, and there is no sensitization around those other layers of issues around class, around race. Tshepo was talking about having your first, like people having their first computers at university. That was me. I inherited my big sister's computer, and then I think my university was having a program around like ensuring every first year student gets a computer, which was very expensive. Like the computer the university was providing was way more expensive than you'd get on the market. And I just think there's so much lack of accessibility. The sensitization has not been prioritized because a lot of focus is still on access. But also when it comes to sensitization, I think about like surveillance, which is around one of the issues that we work from, like state surveillance. And I think that a lot of sensitization on digital use, digital spaces is informed by what governments and also like corporate organizations want people to know, so that then they can use that data for whatever purposes, surveillance, marketing, and all of the things that are anti-human rights. So yeah, I don't think the basics have been covered. Like, even when we talk about basics, what is it? I remember that the struggles around people using Zoom. Still 2 years later into the pandemic, people are still struggling to use online spaces for meetings, or they are dropping off every so often. In Uganda, for example, Facebook is still blocked from the 2021 election, and to use it, you need a VPN, and it's just and so I don't know. In terms of, I don't have a lot of hope. I hope that we are able to say more hopeful things as the conversation goes along. But absolutely, I don't think enough is being done. But I also think the bigger issue is definitely accessibility.
Thank you so much, Sunshine. I believe, and I actually share the same sentiments as you. I think a lot more has to be done when it comes to sensitization within the digital space. I remember during the pandemic, I also struggled with Zoom. It was really something that I think as time I kind of like I understood better. But yeah, I think it's also not just about that, but different kinds of platforms that we use in the tech space. Are people really conversant with using these platforms? Are women even being a part of it? Just to make sure people are not shying away from these platforms and trying to learn more and make their lives better. So I will move on to the following question. I'll redirect this to you, Betty. Would you say African women are ready to, are we actually ready to be digital, or do you think we're not? What's your perspective on this?
I feel that in this day and age, we cannot afford not to be ready. Because whether we like it or not, it's the age we live in, and we've been thrown into it. So we really have to get with the times, regardless of all the challenges and all the difficulties that we've outlined here. But I think that women who are leading, in tech spaces, are doing their best. I've interviewed, I think, about 2 or 3 tech, very techy women on my podcast, and you can tell that they recognize that there's a gap that needs to be bridged. So beyond, I guess, the basic use of the internet, some of them have just made it their mission to train more and more women to enter these spaces. Some of them are basically doing all they can to get more women interested in tech, and to push the agenda when they are no longer there to push it. But I also feel that we need to demystify tech. I think the reason why tech is so male dominated, in my opinion, is because we think, like a lot of things, that's a man's thing. This thing is too complex. I mean, I don't even have the time to really sit and break it down and all that. And some ways, or even my introduction to tech, when I worked in the digital newsroom, it was a man who held my hand through it. And I remember I would say things like, the tech side is really not for me. I'm all about storytelling. So, then I'll call my colleague, just come in, let's figure out the tech side. But I quickly realized that I need to, it can no longer be my excuse. And that I really need to sit down, learn, allow him to teach me and break it down. And when he did, I was like, why was I running away from this? This is actually very easier that I thought early on. So I think that tech really needs to be demystified, because some way, somehow, we are all using tech. Of course, the levels may be different. So even for people, when we talk about accessibility, look at mobile money. Every corner, that mobile networks reach, everybody's doing mobile money transactions, and that's a form of tech that even my grandmother can do. You understand? So I feel that tech needs to be demystified, because at every point in our lives, we would have to engage with it. Like I said, the levels may be different, but I think we all need to join in demystifying it, so that it doesn't become this scary or big thing that women can't take advantage of, or that women can't get into. And it's not just about the Facebooks, the Instagram, the Twitters, the TikToks. They're all very important if you want to, push a certain type of messaging. But even the kinds of work we do, if you are an accountant, I'm sure there are tech platforms, there are softwares, there are, just things, tools that we all need to do our work. If you are a writer, if you are, whatever it is that you are. So we really cannot afford to, we can't say that, we really need to get involved. And I feel that the way to go, despite all the myriad challenges, is really to just demystify it, and at every point break it down, so that everybody, I guess, can understand, everybody can get with it. And just those of us who know how to use it one way or the other, in our small spaces, we must try to encourage more women to take advantage of these platforms that are available, because like it or not, we are all, one way or the other, connected to tech. Even this mobile phone, when you call me, I receive, my grandmother calls me all the time. It's technology. So yeah, we can't afford to sit aloof and say that, let the men run with it, because it's really a men's thing, because it's too challenging or it's too difficult. So yeah, we really cannot afford to sit on the fence on this one.
I agree with you. I remember, currently we have a community right in Botswana where, I'll give you a chance, Sunshine, after I finish. So we currently have a community in Botswana where we usually run events. So I don't know if it's this social narrative or just people's preference, but when we have like a photographer's event, it's so male dominated. You'll find maybe there's one female part of that group, and when we have like an editor's event for people to edit articles maybe about on Wikipedia, there'll be a lot of females. So I don't know how we can even bridge this for people to understand, just to incorporate and learn, be open to learning new things out. Just get out of your box and try and see if maybe somebody could be even a great photographer and they don't know. But people are really there's a perception like people this thing is more male dominated, this one is more female relative. So I think, yes, with that being said, I'll move right on to you, Sunshine. You have a question or something to add on?
I wanted to add to this conversation. I wanted to just like really challenge it a little bit, challenge the idea of individual responsibility, and say that the exclusion of women in spaces, the digital space just now being the conversation, is very deliberate, and it also steeped in patriarchy and misogyny and in historic exclusion of women from spaces. And while we may exist in a space where we are privileged enough to have accessibility, it is not representative of majority of women, and it's also not like it's individual responsibility to an extent. So there's this thing about you can't self-love yourself out of systemic oppression. So unless digital infrastructure, in the ways tools are developed, in the ways tools, digital spaces are developed, marketed, are inclusive, and there is work that is being done. There is like a like 10 principles of the internet that were developed by APC. There is work being done at that macro level. We can't shift the responsibility of the things that we're talking about. We can't. I like to think about like state responsibility and to ensure that technologies are inclusive, but then looking at the pace of things with other rights of women, access to education, access to water, access to food. That African women at the micro level have been working, as they always have, to ensure their businesses online. In Kampala, one of the big markets has a market garden app which connects vendors to purchasing things. Women are organizing around selling clothes, selling shoes, even sex work, building networks, organizing protests. Look at the work that even Candy is doing to convene a space like this. But these efforts can only go far when governments are shutting down internet, data is unaffordable, illiteracy, violence online. And so I think that definitely we have to skip the conversation on why women are not in these spaces, in the larger oppressions around white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, and things like that. Thank you. Sorry. I went.
Oh, thank you so much, Sunshine. I will ask you, Tshepo, share your thoughts on communication, accessibility, and technology, how it can help in bridging gender in the digital space. What is your insight on that? You're on mute.
Yeah, guys, the tech is winning. Jokes. I'm trying to be an independent tech person, like Betty said, and stop saying somebody else will do it for me. I think for me, I am going to have to I agree with Sunshine, because the truth of the matter is that the gender gap is by design. And the design is coming from systematic issues, the biggest one usually being patriarchy. And then when you bring in the fact that in Africa, the numbers are lower than everywhere else, we can then start to talk about neo-colonialism and what all of those things mean. And so for me, I understand tech to be an important tool in organizing for breaking apart all the smashing the patriarchy, right? But I think I have to agree with Sunshine in saying that because the gender gap is designed by all these things that exist outside. So for example, I'm going to give a practical example so we can think about it that way. Let's talk about data and affordability, right? It is statistically proven that women make less money than men in most countries. One, and then I don't know about in other countries, but I'm going to give a specific example of Botswana because I have the research and I know it. In Botswana, we have a large number of female-headed households. And that's been the case for a very long time. In the past census, the last one, not the one they did this year, however, they did note that there was a growth of male-headed households. So the idea of female-headed and male-headed is basically who's paying the bills. Okay. And so even though there are male-headed homes that are growing, that are becoming more present, an interesting thing to note is that the male-headed homes have about 4-5 people living there. So we can guess that to be a nuclear family, probably a guy married and the kids, right? The female-headed households, on the other hand, have numbers ranging from 5 to about 10, 12 people living in that home, which I think most Botswana will relate to. A lot of us have grown, like very few of us have grown up like me in a house with your mom and dad, and just you. Most of us have grown up living at home with your grandmother, who was taking care of you and your other cousins and your aunt and uncle. Some of them were still back home and your parents had gone to work, or, they were not interested or whatever. But most of the time, female-headed households include more than just the nuclear family unit. Another interesting statistic then is that these homes have less money than the male-headed homes, but they are spreading it to support those 11, 12 people. And so the example I'm getting to is basically the gendered nature of poverty, right? We know that women are making less money than men. We know that not only are women making less money than men, they're also spending their money very differently from men. They don't have access to investment opportunities, etc. They're spending their money just to survive. And so things like data means we're going to have fewer women on the internet, because when a woman has 100 pula in her bank account, and a data bundle for a month is 60 pula, and she needs to buy cooking oil, she's not going to buy the data bundle, right? She's going to buy the cooking oil and the meat and etc. And she's not going to go on the internet. And so for me, majority of the work that has to be done to bridge the gender gap isn't exactly on the internet, right? A lot of it is in policy. It's in smashing the day-to-day patriarchy that we're thinking about. It's in building communities like, there's a young woman in Botswana, who has, it's called the clicking generation, but she basically goes and trains young girls on coding, she gives them access to those spaces that they wouldn't get in any other spaces. So it's about that work more than it is something in particular we could do on the internet. It's about policy change, it's pushing towards the government on how we can change the things that make it difficult as a woman to access the internet. I think I answered you, did I?
You did.
Okay.
And I really appreciate the fact that it's not really just about the tech digital space. It trickles down to the pay gap, it's really the politics surrounding these things about women representation and just maneuvering it and leading it to that. I think Sunshine really ironed it well, explaining that systematic issues that surround this gap is where the responsibility lies. And I would also want to move on to the next question. So I have a question for you, Betty. How long have you been exposed to the open or digital tech space? And how has this influenced your knowledge and technological advancement in Africa and beyond?
I would say, the first time I owned a smartphone, and that was years ago. I guess, that was my introduction. And it started, with, I guess, Facebook and, all these other social platforms. And then as you get into the workspace, you and also because of the kind of work I do, you engage more and more with other tech tools. What was the second part of your question?
Let me unmute. The second part of my question was, how has this influenced your knowledge of technological advancement in Africa and beyond?
I mean, it has influenced my knowledge, but I also say that I'm always learning, I'm always discovering so many things about tech. And I think it's really going to be an ending, because this is a space that it's I would how do I it's a young space in terms of the time that tech really exploded, if I should put it that way. It's a young space, but it's also a very vibrant space, and it's a space that is constantly evolving, a space that is constantly changing. So, to answer your question, I don't know if I can answer this question appropriately, but I'll attempt. I would say that, I mean, on a personal level, what I've learned, or what I continue to learn with tech, on a personal level, and also because of the kind of work I do, I am more into using tech to push the kind of work I do, which is telling people stories. So I guess maybe on a personal level, and I mean, on a global level or on the Africa level, since I'm still a storyteller, I guess, tech is still going to be a very useful tool for me, till I decide, probably drop, dead or something, to really push voices globally, to tell people stories, on the continent and beyond, because that's what I do. I'm a storyteller. So, yeah, I guess since my engagement with tech, I've just used it to tell stories. I've just used it even to tell my own story, to push my own voice out there, so to share my opinions. And I guess that's just what I'll continue to do. And as tech continues to evolve in my own small space, I'll do the best that I can to catch up with it. Sometimes it can be very crazy, actually, keeping up with almost every part of it. But I'll do my best in the space that I am. Again, to use these tools, to use, what is available to me, share it with others, and then just share voices and push, people's voices out there. I don't think it probably answers your question, but that's just what I can come up with.
Yes, I think it does. Well, the answer could be different. I mean, for somebody who could be an entrepreneur, I would say it's really important for them to be open to what's happening out there, for them to stay relevant, and for them to be using things that are currently trending at that time, not to follow like the crazy trends that could be happening, but just to be just to be relevant and communicate what's best for the business. Because I feel like if you are not open-minded to learn and maybe unlearn some methods that are from the past, technology is mostly like taking over the world in all of these industries. It could be agriculture, it's everywhere. So from an entrepreneurship perspective, I think it's important for people to stay in touch and see what's happening, and then to see how to innovate and keep and reach out to more people. So yeah, I think that's my
and maybe I'll just add that I know that these systemic challenges, as mentioned by Sunshine and Tshepo, I hope I got the name, Moyo. Maybe Moyo is safer. I mean, obviously, sometimes it's so entrenched that it feels like there's really no way around it, and sometimes it feels like you're really punching a ghost, in an attempt to break through when it comes to these systemic things designed to keep women down, designed to, just basically make women second and third class citizens. But whilst we continue to fight this system, which is such an arduous task, because sometimes you even have women who you Well, Moyo, okay. So you have women, whilst women are punching, you have other women punching back. Whilst you want to dismantle a certain kind of system, you have women in there who will also push back. And that can come as a shock. But I think that even with this big challenge, that's so cumbersome because these systems were designed by men who aren't listening. Basically, they're just not listening. So whilst we continue to push, and get things changed, I feel that in our small ways and small corners, we probably may need to take a certain level of responsibility and try to do what we can to also change things in a small corner. So whilst we keep punching to change the system, I would also maybe encourage that in our small ways we continue to encourage people in our community, in our workspaces. We continue to, particularly women, just encourage girls in schools, young girls, that this gap is there. We need to bridge it. How do we bridge it? We bridge it by bringing in more people of our kind. And I know that, like I said, it may seem like a never-ending thing, but we can't also afford to give up and stop. So I guess in our small ways, we just need to keep pushing. We need to keep pushing and just reaching out to as many people as we can, as many young people as we can, to, I guess, change the status quo. Because sometimes when I think of the systemic thing, like it's like I said, you can think and think and think, and you can actually sometimes spiral out of control. So whilst we do our individual stuff to tackle this, I always like to focus on what I am doing in that space to also just find an opening or a crack into dismantling that system. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Betty. We're just looking at the time. I'll move on to the next question. I'll forward this to you, Sunshine. As a woman in the digital space, what is the most significant challenge you have faced, professional-wise? Yes.
Thank you so much for this question. When I was thinking about it, like maybe you should just list the number. What have I not faced? But just tipping this conversation into what Tshepo was saying earlier around, violence, technology facilitated, technology assisted violence. And as a feminist online, I have felt the full wrath of misogyny and the gatekeepers of the patriarchy online through abuse. Actually, now my Twitter account is private. Through threats of violence. I remember there's a time I got a threat, a rape threat, like someone threatened me online. That they would find me and rape me. I can't count the number of times I've actually deactivated myself, and I'm just speaking on the challenge of social media, specifically as a digital space. And then when things like that happen, then I started to self-censor, like the things I say, the conversations that I engage in, but also because I come from a deeply violent political context. There are things that I probably wouldn't talk about or do in the digital space for fear of state sanctioned violence. And human rights defenders and people who speak out or are quote unquote trying to hold power accountable. So I think those are some of the things. So there's like that harassment and that trolling, and then there's just like the fears around like being surveilled. I don't do a lot of I don't say everything I'm thinking in the digital space. But also just like fears around accessibility. Once you get a few kilometers out of maybe city centers or urban centers, sometimes there are challenges around being able to access the internet. Then our government, it leads the charge on internet shutdowns. So that's always a big challenge around election season when there is a big thing happening. So those are just some of the few that I can speak about. But also there's just like a myriad of other issues that feminists like me, queer people, non-binary. I have a friend, a non-binary person who was trolled by a group of young women on the internet, and they really had to. I think they're actually going to go ahead and institute like proceedings. But that trolling, that's just very steeped in violence against queer people. So yeah, so the misogyny follows us everywhere on the digital space. Yeah, thank you.
I agree. So I agree. The challenges within the tech space are really they're complex. They're quite a lot, especially when you speak your own mind. Cyberbullying may be attached to that, and then suicide comes along, and then just enormous, like a lot of problems that come with maybe being that person who kind of like is bold enough to speak her own mind. There's some consequences sometimes that may come with it. Maybe some political issues. There's always that kind of issue, like you have to be censored and all that. I can attest to that, and seeing all these things that have been happening, maybe in my country, I'll say it. Thank you so much, Sunshine, for your insight. I'll say the last question. I'll forward it to you, Tshepo. So, how do you think the issue of inclusion can be tackled across Africa? Yeah, that's the last question for you.
That's a heavy one. I think it goes back to what Betty said when we started this, of noticing when you're in a room, who's not in the room, right? Because when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about, and Africa is such a wide variety, there's a large number of minorities, queer people, gender diverse people. If we're talking about tribes, in some countries, some tribes are better represented than others. Language, men and women, rich and poor, there's like, when we're talking about inclusion, it's a wide array of things. And I think if you are part of a team, and this is obviously at a very individual level, not at, policy levels, because we've already spoken about how stuff like that needs to change. But as an individual, when you're in a room, ask yourself who's not in the room, and ask yourself, why are they not in the room? And because when you have someone in the room, they can speak to things that you may not be able to think about, for example. So, for example, as able-bodied people, we never think about, you post a picture and it asks you for the alt text. All of us are so lazy to do that, to add the alt text. Like, most of us don't do it. But that's how blind people see images on the internet, by clicking the alt text and hearing the description of the picture. But most of us don't do that. But if, for example, you're creating content for a website and you're working with somebody who was blind, they would tell you, yo, did you put the alt text? And it would become a habit in your life, you know? And so we need to start thinking about that. Like when you are creating content for the internet, when you're using platforms, when you are in a room, who is not in the room, who you want to bring into the conversation and who could add into the conversation, and how do you bring them into the conversation? You know, sometimes we have platforms like this and then we ask ourselves, oh, we didn't have anybody who participated who happened to be deaf, you know, but then you have your Instagram stories or whatever, and you speak like I'm speaking now, and you don't bother to type subtitles. Half the time you're speaking like that, so they can't even read your lips, you know. So just think about those things, you know. Think about how when you use the internet, are you making it inclusive? And I think the best way is that question: who is not in the room, and who do I want to be in the room, and how do I get them in the room?
Oh, that was so insightful. Thank you, Tshepo. I think just to add on what you said, it's not just about finding different appearance of race or whatever when you are in the room, but it's also having that inclusion of different races, of course, and also having that opportunity, avoiding the missing out on opportunities to share ideas and different views. That is very important to have that, despite race or having disability or any other case that may be there. But it's important to think when you are in such, maybe, let me say, a privileged environment where you could have and add these people, think about diversity and inclusion and how it can progress and help with progression and accelerate Africa and beyond, and even outside our comfort zones. It can drive us outside our comfort zones. So I would like everyone to actually share the screens right now. Not share the screens, but share the videos, so that I can see who's on here. And then I would like to thank everyone who came in. It was such a great pleasure having you guys here today. And I would really appreciate that even on our next upcoming panel discussion. I hope you guys will be here. I would like to thank the panelists for agreeing to be a part of this. And this is actually our first panel discussion as the Wikimedia Botswana community. So it was a great pleasure to hear your insights and how you guys are impactful and what you're doing. It also kind of like helps us and inspires us to also push more, put in more strength. It actually strengthens us to have more power, to know that there are people out there who are doing exactly what we also aspire to do. So I'm really excited to be in this journey, and also being a part of the community, and also working in this sector of trying to bridge in the gender gap, teaching my community about how we can have more representation of women, especially on Wikipedia, creating more articles about women and increasing that voice about women on that space. So yes, without further ado, I would like to say thank you so much, everyone, for being a part. Does anyone have any other question? Just before we leave, I know we have audience. Maybe some people have questions. Yeah, go ahead, Sunshine.
Sorry, Candy. I just wanted to again invite everyone to join our Visible Wiki Women campaign 2022, which is about really combating invisibility of women online by sharing images, adding images to Wikipedia articles, and just things like that. So I am just going to put the link in here with all the information so that you're able to join us, and we'll be inviting you for some of our activities as well.
Oh, great. Does anyone, I know we have audience, does anyone have any other questions? I almost skipped that part. Nope. Going once? Twice? All right. Thank you so much, ladies. I'll be seeing you in the next I don't know, maybe a few months or so. But I would like to say bye and see you next time. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice weekend.